The Samsung Galaxy S26 Plus charges at 45 watts. The Xiaomi 15T Pro charges at 90. Both phones use memory chips from the same 3 factories on the planet. One costs $1,100. The other costs $449. And the cheaper one finishes charging before the Samsung reaches 60%. Something broke in the smartphone industry in 2026. Not the screens, not the cameras. The price, the relationship between what you pay and what you get has disconnected so far from reality that most buyers are funding marketing departments, not engineering teams. 6 brands are doing this worse than anyone else right now. And 3 brands have figured out how to deliver more phone for less money than at any point in the last decade. Let's get into the phone brands you need to stop buying. Number 1. Samsung Galaxy S26 Plus. This is going to make people uncomfortable. Samsung is the most popular Android brand on Earth, and the S26 Plus is supposed to be the sweet spot of their 2026 lineup. $1,100 phone that sits between the base S26 and the Ultra. The problem is not that the S26 Plus is a bad phone. The problem is that it's a 2022 phone wearing a 2026 price tag. Here is what $1,100 buys you. A 4,900 milliamp hour battery. 45 watt charging. A 50 megapixel main camera sensor that Samsung has been recycling across multiple generations. UFS 4.0 storage when competitors are shipping UFS 4.1. And in most markets outside the United States, Samsung is not even giving you the best processor available. The international S26 Plus runs the Exynos 2600. The Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 is reserved for the Ultra and select regions only. So depending on where you live, you are paying flagship money for Samsung's in-house chip that historically underperforms Qualcomm's offering in efficiency and thermal management. But the charging speed is where the math falls apart completely. 45 watts in 2026 is not a premium feature. It is a budget feature. The Motorola Edge 70 Pro charges at 90 watts for less than half the price. The OnePlus 15R charges at 80 watts. Multiple Chinese flagships are approaching 120 watts. Samsung has been sitting at 45 watts for years while the rest of the industry doubled and tripled past them. And Samsung's explanation for this? They claim slower charging preserves battery health over time. That sounds reasonable until you realize that Xiaomi, OnePlus, and Motorola have all published long-term battery degradation data showing their fast charging systems maintain over 80% battery health after 1,600 cycles. Samsung's caution is not protecting your battery. It is protecting their engineering budget. The most damaging evidence came from Samsung's own community forums. Actual Samsung owners writing that the S26 Plus is, and this is a direct quote from their support page, not worth the cost, and calling the flagship line overpriced for what they really do. When your own customers are writing this on your own platform, the value proposition has collapsed. Phone Arena ran an opinion piece with a headline that did not require any subtext. They called the Galaxy S26 Plus a phone with no reason to exist. Same cameras. Same battery capacity as last year. Same charging speed as 2 years ago. And a $100 price increase that Samsung justified by saying they had packed in so much innovation. The innovation they were referring to was primarily software updates to Galaxy AI features that arrived as free updates to the S25 Plus anyway. Samsung is not selling you a phone at this price. Samsung is selling you a logo. And in 2026, the logo costs more than ever while delivering less than the competition. Number 2. Apple iPhone base models. Apple has perfected a pricing architecture that most buyers never examine closely enough. The base iPhone, the non-Pro model, has become the most effective profit extraction tool in the industry. Not because it is bad, because it is deliberately incomplete at a price that suggests otherwise. The iPhone 17 launched at $799, For that money, you get a phone that Apple chose to ship with a 60Hz display. Let that settle for a moment. Every $250 Android phone on the market in 2026 ships with a 120Hz OLED panel. A $799 iPhone does not. Apple has the technology. Apple uses it on the Pro models. Apple made a deliberate decision to withhold it from the base model because doing so protects the $200 price gap that drives buyers upward to the Pro. This is not engineering. This is behavioral economics built into a product line. The camera is the same calculation. The base iPhone 17 ships without a telephoto lens. One analysis concluded that the iPhone compares poorly on a spec-for-spec basis against the best Android phones in the same price bracket and called it overpriced for what it offers. Apple reuses the previous generation's chip in the non-Pro models while charging as if the silicon is new. The A19 chip in the iPhone 17 is capable, but it is positioned as a current generation product at a current generation price while being, functionally, a recycled part. Here is the part that changes the whole picture. The iPhone 16e launched at $599, and reviewers found it delivered nearly identical real-world performance to the standard iPhone 17 at $200 less. Same Apple Intelligence features. Same iOS experience. Consumer Reports battery testing scored it competitively with the full price model. The $200 gap between the 16e and the standard 17 buys you almost nothing that affects daily use. Apple knows this. Apple set the prices anyway. If you are buying into the Apple ecosystem, the base iPhone is the wrong entry point in 2026. Either buy the 16e and save $200 for identical daily performance, or stretch to the Pro and actually get the features the base model deliberately withholds. The standard iPhone exists to make both other options look reasonable. That is its actual function in Apple's product line. Number 3. Sony Xperia. Sony charges $999 and above for the Xperia 1 series. The phone includes a 4K display, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and professional-grade camera controls with manual exposure, manual focus, and Cinema Pro video modes. On paper, this sounds like a phone designed for a specific, demanding user who values these features. In practice, it is a phone designed for a user who barely exists anymore. The 4K display burns through battery at a rate that forces Sony to compromise on battery life, a metric that actually matters to 99% of smartphone users. The headphone jack is genuinely valued by audiophiles, but Bluetooth audio quality has improved to the point where the wired advantage is measurable only with equipment that costs more than the phone itself. The manual camera controls are excellent but replicate functionality that professional photographers already have in dedicated cameras they carry for serious work. The phone camera they use on the go is almost always in auto mode, where Sony's computational photography trails Google, Apple, and Samsung by a meaningful margin. Software support is shorter than what Samsung and Google offer. Market availability is limited. After-sales support outside Japan is thin, and the resale value drops faster than competing flagships because the buyer pool for the next owner is even smaller than the original buyer pool. Sony built a phone for a version of the market that existed in 2018. The 2026 market has moved. Sony has not. Number 4. Phones from brands that are dying or dead. Asus officially exited the smartphone market in January 2026. Chairman Johnny Shi confirmed the decision at a company event in Taipei. The ROG Phone 9 Fei and the Zenfone 12 Ultra were the last phones the company will ever make. Asus is pivoting to AI servers and robotics, where the margins are larger and the competition is less suffocating. Any Asus phone you see for sale right now is a dead-end device. 2 years of software support on phones that cost flagship money. No future security patches beyond what has already been committed. Declining app compatibility as Android versions advance past the phone's last update. The hardware might work for another 18 months. The software is already on a timer. And Asus is not alone. OnePlus is reportedly being dismantled by its parent company Oppo. Reports indicate that Oppo has begun canceling the OnePlus 2026 product lineup and has plans to exit North American and European markets. The R&D teams in India have been laid off. Approximately 10 employees remain in North America. The OnePlus 15 and 15R are excellent phones, but buying into a brand that may not exist in your market within 12 months carries a risk that no spec sheet can offset. The pattern here is not random. LG exited smartphones in 2021. HTC is effectively gone. BlackBerry disappeared years ago. Asus just followed. OnePlus appears to be next. The smartphone market is consolidating violently, and the brands that cannot sustain volume are being crushed by the same force. Rising component costs. DRAM prices surged over 170% year-over-year by the third quarter of 2025. Memory modules that cost manufacturers less than $100 12 months ago are approaching $400 for premium configurations. Brands operating on thin margins cannot absorb that increase. They either raise prices past what their audience will pay, cut specs below what the competition delivers, or exit. Before you hand over $600 or $800 to any brand, ask one question. Will this company still be making phones in 2028? If the answer is not obviously yes, your money belongs somewhere else. Number 5. Samsung Galaxy S26 base model. Samsung appears twice on this list because the base Galaxy S26 deserves its own entry for a different reason than the Plus. The S26 starts at $799. For that price, you receive a 4,300 mAh battery. That number would have been acceptable in 2022. In 2026, competitors are shipping 65 to 7,400 mAh cells in phones that cost $200 to $400 less. The charging situation is slightly improved. Samsung bumped the base model from 25 watts to 45 watts. But that improvement only highlights how far behind Samsung was in the first place. The base S26 now charges at the speed the Plus model charged at last year. It is not an upgrade. It is a correction being marketed as a feature. The base S26 uses the Exynos 2600 in most markets. It packs the same recycled camera sensors. The display is excellent, but has not meaningfully changed in 2 years. And at $799, it sits in the most dangerous part of the market. The price range where flagship killers from Poco, Xiaomi, and Motorola deliver objectively comparable or superior hardware at half the cost. The base Galaxy S26 is not a bad phone, but $799 for this specific combination of specs in 2026 is a choice that only makes sense if you do not look at what $400 buys from the competition. Number 6. Budget carrier-locked phones from TCL and Alcatel. These are the phones that sit behind the counter at carrier stores, the ones that come free or nearly free with a 2-year plan. They feel like deals. They are not. The Alcatel V3 Ultra requires a monthly subscription fee to use its Stylus Notes app. A subscription fee for a Notes app on a phone you already paid for. TCL phones are sold primarily through carrier deals that lock you into plans costing more per month than the phone is worth. The hardware quality trails what Motorola and Samsung deliver at identical price points in the unlocked market. But the real cost is hidden. These phones ship with outdated Android versions that receive one major update at best. Security patches stop within 18 months. Performance degrades as apps update past what the processor can handle. Within 2 years, you are carrying a device that is slower, less secure, and less functional than a $200 unlocked Motorola that would have cost you less over the contract period. Carrier math is designed to obscure total cost. The phone is not free. The phone is financed into your monthly bill at a markup you cannot see unless you compare the plan price against a SIM-only alternative on the same network. The difference over 24 months frequently exceeds the retail price of a significantly better unlocked phone. Now, 3 phone brands you can actually trust. The brands that survive the 2026 market share one characteristic. They have figured out how to deliver genuine value at a price the market data can defend. Not marketing, not brand mythology. Measurable, testable, observable value. Number 1. Google Pixel. The Pixel 10 Pro is the phone that makes the strongest case against overspending. 7 years of guaranteed OS updates. 7 years of security patches. That alone changes the cost per year math more dramatically than any single hardware spec. Google's camera processing is not just competitive. It is the reference standard that other brands measure themselves against. The Pixel does not win on sensor size or megapixel count. It wins on computational photography, the software intelligence that turns a good sensor into consistently great photographs. Samsung flagships may pack higher resolution sensors, but they struggle to capture moving subjects reliably. The Pixel does not have that problem. And here is the detail that matters most for long-term ownership. Pure Android. No duplicate apps. No Samsung Calendar competing with Google Calendar. No manufacturer browser competing with Chrome. No bloatware consuming storage and processing cycles for the life of the device. The Pixel runs exactly the software Google designed, nothing more, and every byte of storage and every processing cycle is yours. Number 2. Xiaomi 15T Pro. This is the phone that makes the pricing model of Samsung and Apple look indefensible. A 144Hz OLED display. Charging speeds that finish before Samsung phones reach half capacity. A Bose-branded speaker system that GSM Arena tested and confirmed is genuinely impressive, not a licensing gimmick. Excellent battery life. A camera system that earns top marks across every major review metric, and a price that sits $500 to $700 below the Samsung and Apple phones it matches or beats in every measurable category. The Xiaomi 15T Pro is not a compromise phone. It is a revelation phone. The phone that makes you realize the price you have been paying elsewhere was never about the hardware. It was about the brand name printed on the box. Number 3. Motorola Edge 70 Pro. Motorola has done something quietly remarkable in 2026. They have built the most complete phone at the most honest price in the industry. A 6,500 mAh battery, 980-watt charging, a 6.8-inch 144Hz AMOLED display, military-grade durability rated MIL STD 810H, near-stock Android without the bloatware, and a price under $400. That battery specification alone changes the ownership experience. A 6,500 mAh cell does not just last longer than a 4,300 mAh Samsung battery. It eliminates the anxiety. You stop thinking about battery. You stop planning your day around charging. You stop carrying a power bank. The phone simply lasts, from morning to night, and into the next morning if you are conservative with screen brightness. Motorola phones will never trend on social media. Nobody posts their Motorola Edge on Instagram to signal taste. That is precisely why the value equation works. The money that Samsung and Apple spend on cultural positioning, Motorola spends on battery cells, charging circuits, and durable materials. You are not paying for a lifestyle brand. You are paying for a phone. By the way, nearly every phone mentioned in this video is linked in the description below if you want to check current prices. I only link products I have actually researched and would genuinely recommend, so if anything caught your attention, the links are there. Here is the bottom line. The smartphone industry in 2026 is built on one assumption: that you will not do the math. That you will see Samsung or Apple on the box and assume the $800 to $1,300 price tag is justified because the brand is familiar. The brands on this list are counting on that assumption. The 3 brands worth trusting are counting on something different. They are counting on you reading the spec sheet, comparing the charging speed, checking the battery capacity, looking at the software support timeline, and making a decision based on what the phone actually delivers, not what the logo on the back promises. The gap between what premium brands charge and what competitive brands deliver has never been wider than it is right now. In 2026, the smartest phone purchase is not the most expensive one. It is the most informed one. If this breakdown saved you from overspending, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video covers 7 phone brands robbing you blind, and the data on one of those brands is going to change how you think about every phone purchase you have ever made.